Okay. Okay, Glendora, we're starting episode 7 now, and to review the last episode, the end of it was that the judge was retaliating. He was going to sock me with $260,000 in legal fees, and actually, by the way, I was owed $100,000. So he got the $260,000, and then he added interest of $150,000. That totaled $410,000. Or I would be in danger of losing my home and all my assets. So I had to go out and secure a very expensive mortgage on my home because I had to get it quickly, and I was charged a lot of interest to settle this illegal judgment, which caused problems for me later also. Okay, so much for that nightmare. Now, from here, we're going to go on to, I met a gentleman in my church because I had a lot of publicity. And, I was in Absolute Magazine, Forbes, Fortune, Worth, Manhattan Style, New York Post, Palm Beach papers, the Post and the Daily News, and others. I mean, we worked hard. We were spiked with a lot of them, but we did get into some of the papers. So a member of my church saw me in one of the articles in Forbes, and seeing me in church, he asked if he could see me at the coffee hour and suggested perhaps he could help me. He was of German national, and he knew the chairman of Deutsche Bank in Germany, and of course he spoke German, and also was a management consultant, so he knew how to review the financial assets and liabilities of the estate. So being from the same church, I trusted him, and I saw him different times in church, so I agreed verbally that if he could settle this after he went through records and so forth, I was prepared to honor an agreement regarding compensation, which he agreed with. So he spent time, I would say about 3 years, going through documents. I paid for 2 trips to Germany, plus expenses, since he indicated he would prepare to speak at a shareholders meeting, and he knew executors of the bank that he could speak with. He kept in touch with us by phone. In those days, I guess they didn't use, texting too much and all that. So anyway, he kept in touch by the phone. And Alex his name was Alex Lehman, he spoke at shareholders meetings. He suggested that I buy some stock in Deutsche Bank, and that way he could, as a shareholder, he could represent me at a meeting. Now, at the meeting, when he went to the shareholders meeting, the attorney for a man by the name of Leo Kirsch, who had a European media empire, was suing Deutsche Bank for like $5 billion. And Leo Kirsch's attorneys came up to Alex and gave him their card and asked if he would call them. Alex indicated he had trouble getting in touch with them, and then he told us he lost their card, which was difficult to comprehend because we thought it was, a good connection. My group was able, through a contact though, to reach out to the Kirsch attorneys and had a in-depth conversation with them, exchanging thoughts, a banker's trust company, Deutsche Bank, that they were a convicted United States federal felon, and so forth. So, that worked out okay. Following this encounter, we became leery of Alex Lehman's loyalty, though, since this was, really a golden opportunity, which he failed to take advantage of. Now, David Kiko, the bank's attorney representing the bank, in my case, now wanted a deposition of Alex Lehman. Well, Alex got a little nervous and a little concerned about it. And I think the bank was concerned because he spoke about me at a shareholders meeting. I mean, to make any of this public, they don't like. So I presume this made the bank nervous. Perhaps Alex also he did get concerned, so he told me his wife wanted him to get paid after this was over with, the deposition. And of course I replied that our verbal agreement was if he could settle, you know, I would compensate him if he could settle it. Then he said he'd have to sue me for $80,000. And I will say he did a 90-page document from all the records, you know, what the present worth of the estate would be at that time, which is like 2003, and the assets and liabilities of the estate and so forth. So he did have the document, however he didn't settle the case. It was I was quite upset and discussed it with the pastor of our church, and he felt according to biblical teachings and the fact that he is a fellow member offering to help a widow, he should not be paid at all. Well, then the pastor called me and said that he suggested a meeting with Alex, myself, and one of my group, if I so desired, in the pastor's office. My group was quite concerned and discussed it, decided not to participate since they did not trust Alex. I guess in retrospect, I probably should have gone to a meeting. So Alex sued me. And believe it or not, and it cost me about $40,000, which bled me of more money with no settlement with the bank. I then had written many, my group and myself helped me write many letters trying to reach out to private individuals, corporate leaders, you know, about my nightmare. We kept working at it. Now I'll go to the fact, it was my fifth attorney, but the others were rather short-lived, the first two. And then came Peter Raymond, and then came Mark Oxman. And then came Ray Dowd. Now Ray Dowd is the one who charged me $250,000, first of all, for 1 year, but he did a lot of drafts, just continually did drafts of motions he was going to put in, but he never filed them. So, and one of my group was helping him a lot, doing all the running and the copying and everything else, but they never got filed. So finally there was one motion at the end that one of my group had convinced him, you better get this in, something. So it was a motion to open up the substitution of fiduciary to see if the McCormick estate was transferred from Bankers Trust Company to Bankers Trust Company of New York. Now, this was something we weren't completely aware of, all the details in this kind of thing. However, they actually got threatened when they filed the papers by the bank, Leo Malonis and David Kiko. Evidently told them that if they filed these papers about the substitution, that they would put into sanction Mark Oxman. Ray Dowd. Ray Dowd was his name, and Suzanne McCormick. So Ray Dowd got on the phone with us and really was frantic, like he just, we can't file this. We absolutely can't. I mean, this is how the bank will threaten lawyers, because one lawyer even said to me, he said, you know, Suzanne, I have a family I have to support. I can't lose my license. And these people, this is what they do to people. And I'm sure even with politics, this is what goes on. They threaten people. So the point is, then they withdrew their papers, but the court hearing was still going to take place, even though it was put in that they were drawing their papers. So this was around 2003. we found, first of all, from different victims of the bank, that they had received, well, clients of the bank, I guess, they had received a letter from William Wilkie, managing director of the trust department of Bankers Trust Company. Deutsche Bank purchased Bankers Trust Company in 1999. So, since Bankers Trust Company had a federal felony, then Deutsche Bank wanted to change the name from Bankers Trust Company. Of course, when they purchased it, it was a substitution of fiduciary to Bankers Trust Company of New York. So they didn't give the reason, but they sent all these letters to all these trusts and estates. And it's my understanding, since the trusts and estates would be transferred from Bankers Trust Company to Bankers Trust Company of New York, that became a legal entity. That was September 7, 1999. Now, Jonathan Manny Place, another victim, went to the probate surrogate court in Greenwich, Connecticut, trying to find out if that court had received the papers saying there would be a substitution of fiduciary with any clients. And when he checked there, it had not been filed there, even though the affidavit of service by White and Case stated it had been filed. Then he got concerned, so as a result, he wrote to all the courts listed on the affidavit of service by White and Case, stating they had been filed, you know. He wanted to check if they were filed. As a result, he wrote all the courts, as I say, on the affidavit of service, asking if they had received the substitution papers. Most all of them that replied indicated they had never received the substitution of fiduciary papers. The one thing Ray Dowd did was file papers as to whether the McCormick estate was transferred from Bankers Trust Company to Bankers Trust Company of New York. Now, we were not, at that point, we hadn't really discovered what was on the letters testamentary. So it went to New York State Supreme Court, and the judge was Carla Moskowitz. Now, we knew a certain state senator that we went and discussed with her my case. When I told her about my nightmare case, she phoned the New York State Attorney General, Elliot Spitzer, at that time. And Elliot Spitzer then called, I think at that time he might have called, but he was in contact before too with Anthony Scarpino, the judge, and had a sit-down talk with him. But he also got in touch this time with Judge Moskowitz about my case. And he said he was interested in the case. Ray Dowd, my attorney at that time, got quite concerned about us investigating this, since he evidently got some kind of threats. As I tell you, he got threats. Okay, now these are in my notes. So we insisted on appearing in court. I mean, we told Ray Dowd, no, we wanted to appear in court. Now, one result was that the bank's attorneys covering for White and Case, namely David Kiko, renounced any role in any trust for McCormick estate, which, as you know, they were supposed to form a trust. But they mishandled so much money, as Win Rutherford said, there's so much money in this estate, it will never run out. So they mishandled a lot of money, and we've tracked down a good part of it. But some of it, of course, we wouldn't know everything, but we know a lot. And then my attorney advised the court that his client was withdrawing. My attorney advised that I was withdrawing her application in all aspects, and he sent his young attorney, Jason Bogley, to join me in court. So that's one thing David Kiko did. He renounced any role in any trust for McCormick. Now, there was only one problem. Evidently, Elliot Spitzer had sent Judge Moskowitz a letter or a note and said he was interested in my case. So we had suspected, of course, that my attorneys got cold feet and possibly threatened by the bank's attorneys, which we know now they did. Now, when the judge asked for the files, which, by the way, the McCormick estate was sealed, so she asked them to get the files out on the substitution to see if McCormick estate was listed on the substitution from Bankers Trust Company to Bankers Trust Company of New York. Then at that time, when she opened the files, she said, "Oh, I have a note here." First of all, Leo Malona stood up and he said, "She is trying to put the bank out of business," referring to me, of course. And the judge then was handed a letter from Elliot Spitzer, the New York State Attorney General, stating he had interest in my case. Now, I want to say I've never tried, Glendora, to put the bank out of business. I'm not trying to do that. Actually, why would I even want to? I want to get it out of business. In reality, I mean, I wouldn't want to. In my opinion, Mr. Malonis and Mr. Kiko, the bank's attorneys, are the ones who are going to put the bank out of business. So they got nervous because I'm finding out what criminality they are guilty of. You see, they started getting nervous, and we didn't put all the dots together. It's like a puzzle. I mean, you have to figure out, why are they doing this? Why did they do that? Why did they get nervous? Why did they do this or that? And they're trying to figure out what I'm doing. So the biggest crime, in my opinion, is a cover-up, which is what they continually keep doing. Because I'm finding out what criminality they're guilty of. So at that very time in the court, we didn't quite put everything together. What we discovered later, it dawned on us, of course, the McCormick estate was already, the letters testamentary were made out to Bankers Trust Company of New York, which was illegal. It was supposed to be Bankers Trust Company. The other estates were transferred to Bankers Trust Company of New York in 1999. That was 10 years after my husband's death. But in my husband's will, he had Bankers Trust Company, and that's who he nominated. And on the letters testamentary, when he died, they had Bankers Trust Company of New York, which was not in existence until 10 years later. So I'm sure maybe it didn't quite, the light didn't hit us right away, but I'm sure that Mr. Malonis and Mr. Kiko, they were pretty aware of these things. So, in fact, I have to say here, Mr. Kiko kept saying, "Oh, Bankers Trust of New York, that's geographic." Now, either Mr. Kiko doesn't know his history on Bankers Trust Company since 1903. He doesn't know his facts, or otherwise he's simply lying, which could be true also, because basically they lie and deny. So now I must add also, the law secretary then went to everyone in the courtroom and asked who was there and what they were there for. There were two young ladies who responded that they were court observers from White and Case, sitting immediately on my left. So they had people supervising. And I'll tell you another thing, is Mr. Leo Malonis, before the court started, he was nervously on the phone, I'm sure, to his masters who were giving him directions. So they were rather a little nervous about this whole setup. Now the judge stated in her decision, this was her decision, the court is unable to find that McCormick's motive in bringing this application was to harass or injure the bank, because that's what they tried to say in order to have me sanctioned, and my lawyer. But she said to bring this, my purpose was not to harass or injure the bank. And the judge further stated that they do not support the conclusion that the application was frivolous and does not prove that McCormick engaged in the sort of conduct that calls for the imposition of sanctions. So she ordered that the cross motion by Bankers Trust Company, now known as Deutsche Bank Trust Company Americas, and Bankers Trust Company of New York, now known as Deutsche Bank Trust of New York, for an award of sanctions is denied. We actually didn't put the puzzle together, as I say, at that time. I'm repeating a little bit because I have notes and then I try to ad lib, and it gets so I repeat. Anyway, we didn't put the puzzle together that in the McCormick states they could not transfer from Bankers Trust Company to Bankers Trust Company of New York, the new entity, because it was already illegally listed in our letters testamentary at the time of death, when it wasn't a company then, as Bankers Trust Company of New York, dated January 25, 1989. Sorry, the phone went off. Which was not in existence at that time. So you see their problem. So they quickly renounced any trust in the McCormick estate. No trust. Since, as I say, they were to have a trust, and the will called for a trust, but mishandled all the money, so they never formed one. So going through this process ultimately gave us the facts and insight that we revealed the named entity on the permanent letters testamentary dated January 5, 1989, and they had Bankers Trust of New York. It was fraudulent. I guess looking back, we should not have been surprised, since Bankers Trust Company was, believe you me, they're a convicted federal felon. Now, I don't know if in the past I had said that Leo Malonis tried to have a certificate of relief of disabilities, which he thought he could pull that over on us too. But the point is, their crime is federal, and the certificate of relief of disabilities is for state. So it doesn't cover their criminal felony. So he tried to say, well, we have a certificate of relief for disabilities, which most people think of it as a get out of jail free card. But that didn't cover them in this case. So you see, they can lie or try to do anything, in my opinion. That's what they do, and from what I see. But if you don't know your law, and you don't know, it's like if you had a heart operation and you said, wait a minute, if I have a heart operation, I'm going to have to go to medical school and learn about how they do it before I have it, to be sure they do right. I mean, it's unreal what goes on. So they take advantage of people. In fact, I know of one victim, a woman, which I might have said earlier in my notes, I don't know, but she had cancer, breast cancer, and she was having chemotherapy treatments, and she needed money. And finally the judge did allow her some money from her trust, and she was entitled to much more. But he finally allowed her some, but the bank wouldn't pay her, and he wouldn't enforce his ruling. So she died. Actually, she couldn't keep getting her expensive chemotherapy treatments. So, you know, I'm revealing this, Glendora, because people do not understand all this. They just really are not informed at all. Now, since we do a lot of publicity, I'm going to say, I don't know how many minutes I have left on this episode, but I am going to say that we got publicity with the Palm Beach Post. And that happened because Mark Oxman, I had him as a lawyer. He was my second one. Cost me $100,000. And he filed papers, but he was the one who wanted me to, he didn't discuss it with me, but the lawyer in the court, if you remember, asked me what I wanted, and I said justice. So they were upset, and he went to speak in the other room to Malonis and Kiko, and of course when I said justice, they said, no, we don't want to talk talk with her. So we're not going to negotiate with her. So I thought the court was in charge, but instead they come back and tell me, well, they don't want to talk with you. I mean, you know, but anyway, now, Mark Oxman said to me, he said afterwards when the thing was finished with him, he said, listen, if you pick it 21 days in a row, they will settle because they don't want the publicity. So guess what? I had the house in Florida that my husband left to me. So I decided I'd go down there and I picketed 21 days. And mostly by myself. Sometimes it was with another person. But occasionally it was by myself, and I kept in touch with my New York people as I was there. In fact, I was picketing, and when I started, the bank said, she can't do this. So they called the police and everything, and he said, well, the police said, I guess you can't really do that. I said, why not? So I went to the county office in Palm Beach, and I said, show me in black and white where it says I cannot, as a United States citizen, I cannot picket or protest, and I'm on a public sidewalk. So they said, okay, we don't have it printed in front of us, but we'll look for it. I said, okay, let me know in a day, and if you find it, you know, I want to know. Well, I didn't hear from them, so I called a day later, and they said, well, no, they couldn't find it. So it ended up that I ended up picketing. I didn't stop. They had no proof. So now, Glendora, again, I'm going to have to end this episode, and I will I'll tell the remainder part of this on the next episode. Okay, thank you. Talk to you later. See you next week.